here's something amazing that churches are doing that you may not know about. I think it
Yeah.
gives people hope, not just for ending homelessness, but hope for a church that in times like these is willing to step up. Made the decision after a few years that I wanted these two communities that I was a part of to be in a better conversation with each other,
Mm.
the church and homelessness, both those who experience it and those organizations that specialize in ending homelessness. I just felt that the church needed a more intentional, thoughtful, strategic involvement in that work. It was really important to tell these stories in a way that felt inspirational and didn't feel like, here's all the things that you're supposed to be doing and shame on you if you're not, right? What I really wanted to create was a menu of options. Not every church has the capacity, the skill set, the whatever to do one specific thing as though like this is what every church should be doing. There is something that everyone can be doing.
What did you write? What is Hope for the Mission?
Well, Hope for the Mission is
Hello and welcome to Three Questions, the series where I sit down with authors who've written something that you need to read. And I am here with Kevin Nye, who is the co-founder of the National Faith Coalition to End Homelessness. And he has written an incredible book called Hope for the Mission. And I am excited to talk about what he has written. Kevin, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. And I have to say right at the outset, just given my own background as somebody who has spent time in ministry in both homelessness and in prison ministry, the book that you wrote really touched me in a lot of ways, and in the encounters that I've had, the people who I hold dearly. So I just want to start by saying thank you for writing what you've written.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing that work because we need more good folks involved in that work, and I'm glad that the book spoke to your experience in both of those settings. Because as much as I my area of focus is homelessness, I think what I tried to write what has implications in lots of types of ministry and service um, where systems bear down on vulnerable people. So.
Certainly, certainly, certainly. So let's start out with the first question that we like to ask is,
Yeah.
who are you?
Well, you gave me a little bit of an intro, but I can definitely expand on it. My name's Kevin Nye. I live here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. By day, I'm the housing director at an organization that serves 18 to 24-year-olds experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity. And then I like to say by night because it makes me sound like a superhero. Um, I I write, I advocate, I co-founded, as you said, the National Faith Coalition to End Homelessness. Because for me, I grew up in the church. I experienced a call to ministry at a young age. I went to seminary, sort of pursued that through all the traditional methods until, you know, my vocation took a left turn into this homelessness space. And I recognized that as my emerging calling. And I really um, made the decision after a few years that I wanted these two communities that I was a part of to be in a better conversation with each
Mm.
other, the church and homelessness, both those who experience it and those organizations that um, specialize in ending homelessness. I just felt that the church needed a more intentional, thoughtful, strategic involvement in that work. And that's not to say that the church wasn't or isn't involved in homelessness, but the language it used, the spaces it occupied seemed um, sort of siloed from the work that I was doing professionally and all of the learning and the best practices that we engaged with. And I felt that there was no need for that separation, and so chose to sort of step into that with writing, with advocacy, and now with speaking and leading this coalition.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the continuity spiritually and theologically between the ministry work that you've done and that so many people do and the service to the unhoused, that the way that you're bridging so many gaps between what we think and say and do in churchy circles to the gap between that and those who are experiencing homelessness and really struggling with that and struggling to make their faith a part of that service to those who are experiencing that. I really see a beautiful flow between those areas that you're helping to bridge. It's really incredible.
Yeah, thank you. That's the goal.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So let me ask our second question. What is it that you've written? What did you write? What is Hope for the Mission?
So Hope for the Mission is an attempt to really dig into what it actually looks like to do this type of work as people of faith. And rather than it being an instruction manual or a how-to or a list of values and ideals and practices, I wanted to tell stories. And
Hmm.
so what the book largely ends up being is a collection of stories of churches and faith-based organizations that are getting it right,
Hmm.
that approach the issue of homelessness with thoughtfulness, with curiosity, with humility, and an intention to end homelessness rather than to perpetuate it,
Hmm.
with a correct understanding of what the causes of homelessness are and what its resolutions are. And so that's where the subtitle of Getting It Right in the
Hmm.
call to end homelessness comes in, is I wanted to tell stories of folks who are getting it right to serve as maybe a roadmap, maybe a conversation partner for churches who maybe want to get into this work, maybe affirmation for a church that has been in this work and needs to see themselves in the story of someone else. And then part of what the book is as well is in acknowledging what it looks like to get it right, there is a implicit understanding that there are some folks who are getting it wrong and
Hmm.
naming what that wrongness looks like. And so the beginning of the book really takes its time to confront the history and the beliefs and practices of institutions, specifically those known as gospel rescue missions,
Hmm.
who by and large operate under a specific methodology that I argue misunderstands what homelessness is and focuses on all the wrong things. So there, in the getting it right, there is a getting it wrong that needs to be
Yeah.
confronted. But I also didn't want to write a whole book about what's going wrong, right? And
Yeah.
so the vast majority of the book is these stories of what it looks like to get it right.
Absolutely. And the stories are so inspiring and are so beautifully cautionary, the ones that have to do with getting it wrong. And the balance between the two is really expertly done. As I was reading the portions where you were describing things, areas where we get it wrong as the church and as organizations that uh, fight against homelessness from a faith-based perspective, I was challenged in areas where either I had gotten it wrong or I had given a thumbs up or a pat on the back to people who are getting it wrong earlier in my ministry and even later on in my ministry when I was actively serving people in that population. But at the same time, I was reading the stories of people getting it right and thinking, oh, wow, that's not only is that incredible, but oh, I feel affirmed in things that I feel like I got right and the people that I was working alongside got right. Or I was inspired to say, oh, now that I'm no longer doing this vocationally, but I aim to participate in initiatives where I can do it on a layperson basis. I was inspired by those stories to get it right and to be a part of others who are getting other organizations and groups that are getting it right. So really, the effect that you were going for, at least for me as a reader, really hit home.
That's great to hear. Yeah, it was really important, right, to tell these stories in a way that felt inspirational and didn't feel like um, here's all the things that you're supposed to be doing
Mhm.
and shame on you if you're not, right? What I really wanted to create was a menu of options,
Mhm.
right? That because, one of the early chapters is about churches that have sold or developed property to become affordable housing, right? But
Mhm.
some churches don't even own property. The church I
Mhm.
attend doesn't own property. They rent property to worship on Sundays and for their weekly activities, right? So not every church has the capacity, the skill set, the whatever to do one specific thing as though like this is what every church should be doing, right?
Absolutely.
There is something that everyone can be doing.
Hmm.
Um, and and while I say that it's a menu, it's also not a menu in that like these are the only things that you can do, right?
Yeah.
This is a these are options that you can choose from or that you can pick from or just allow them to stir your imagination toward the thing that maybe your church can uniquely do.
Yeah. I love that. It's a menu, but not an exhaustive one, and
Yes,
one that you can play with. You can take ingredients from here and there and cooking methods from here and there and make a brand new dish for your context. I love that.
exactly. The metaphors stretch incredulity a little bit,
Yeah, sure.
but we're getting there.
So the third question I love to ask is who should read Hope for the Mission? Who's the ideal reader for this book?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because, you know, as an author, you always have a couple main audiences in mind, and then you kind of end up getting surprised by some others. I think that the main audience I had in mind was uh, churches and church leaders who say, we want to do something about homelessness and we just don't know what.
Mhm.
Um, but I think there's a secondary audience that I also have in mind who are folks of faith who maybe are frustrated that their churches aren't doing something and are looking for some sign of hope from the church at all on this
Mhm.
issue.
Yeah.
And just to know that there are churches doing something, even if it's not their church or even if they're not at a place where they feel comfortable going to church, right?
Mhm.
That like to know that there are folks doing something about this thing that I care about in Jesus' name is a source of hope, right?
Absolutely.
Um, Obviously, it's really early. The book is very new, but some of the most interesting responses I've got are from folks who are more so in the homeless services side and not in the faith side,
Mm.
who are have read it and it's helped them reconsider how to build partnerships with churches, where I think
Mm.
that a lot of those in the secular services side just very easily write off churches because they've heard
Sure.
of gospel rescue missions and what they do. They've heard of this one church in our area that, you know, serves soup but makes people listen to a Bible bashing sermon first. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
they therefore have no interest in making partnerships with churches at all.
Sure. Sure.
But this book and when I speak at conferences and stuff has sort of opened them up to the notion that there may be more to that story and there may be
Mhm.
churches who are worth partnering because they don't engage those type of practices and that they actually share a lot of values. I had one person read the book and say who works in homelessness advocacy at a national level, and she said, "Hey, your book actually made me look up churches in my area, which I haven't done
Wow.
in like 10 years." And I was
Wow.
like, I would have never dreamed that that was my intention for the
Yeah.
book, but that's sort of the surprising impact that a book can have that says, here's something amazing that churches are doing that you may not know about. I think it
Yeah.
gives people hope, not just for ending homelessness, but hope for a church that in times like these is willing to step up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd add that somebody who would really get a lot out of this book is somebody who's frustrated with the way that faith-based organizations and churches, when they're getting it wrong, other and dehumanize people who are experiencing homelessness, and those people become the object through which the church or the organization or the person can feel good and righteous.
Yeah.
Instead, the book really humanizes, empowers, and uplifts the individuals who are experiencing homelessness. So that's another really impactful aspect of the book in my reading.
Yeah, thank you. Part of what I have in mind when I'm writing both my first book and this one was I wanted it to be accessible. I wanted somebody who is more conservative than I to be able to pick up that book and not immediately feel like I'm talking past them or that they're they're not welcome
Hmm. Hmm.
within those pages. And at the same time, I I had to, it was non-negotiable that somebody who has done this work for decades or somebody who has experienced homelessness wouldn't pick up the book and feel betrayed, right?
Mm.
That I didn't tell the whole truth, that I
Yeah.
didn't that I sugarcoated things or softened things so that folks could not be offended, right?
Mm. Hmm.
Which was a really delicate balance that, I'm sure at sometimes I did better than others, but that was sort of a North Star was how do I hold those two things in tension, and if they were ever unresolvable, I'm going to lean more towards the honesty
Yeah.
and the siding with those whose experience needs to be told.
Mm. Well, that leaning towards honesty definitely comes across in these pages. I want to highly recommend to anybody watching this that you pick up a copy of Hope for the Mission. It is an incredible book full of powerful stories and meaningful lessons. Kevin, I want to thank you for being here with me today. Is there anything that you would like to make viewers aware of? Any initiatives, events, organizations, anything you want to plug?
Sure, yeah. So we mentioned earlier the work I'm doing with the National Faith Coalition to End Homelessness. That's a really exciting new project
Mhm.
um, where we are trying to bring churches, organizations, all under sort of one umbrella, so that we can speak with one voice, we can share ideas and resources. We're asking churches to really dive in and consider celebrating what we're calling National Homelessness Sunday on October
Mhm.
11th, to set aside that one day of worship for just a really thoughtful remembrance of this issue and an invitation to enter into it in a prayerful way. And so the way to get more information about that is on our website, which is nfceh.org.
Awesome. Awesome. That website, as well as all of the ways that you can reach Kevin and find the book, are going to be in the link to this video. Thank you again for watching. And Kevin, thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, of course.